Hey, Pastor Brian again, ready for day 2 of Bible study? I hope so. I hope you took time to take your little book and, look through the Job man account that we talked about yesterday, and then also the dinosaurs, or dinosaurs in the Bible, Job 40, Job 41. Hope you took time to read that. Short answer, yes, they are. Evolution lies and says dinosaurs and men didn't exist at the same time, and yet we have drawings, carvings, stories all throughout history that talked about dinosaur and men together, all throughout history. They didn't call them dinosaurs until 1841. That's when they invented the word dinosauria, which sounds very dinosaurish. But dinosauria, which means terrible lizard. But before 1841, just 179 years ago, they had to call them something, so what did they call them? They called them dragons. Dragon, talk about a terrible lizard, right? Dragon stories are everywhere throughout history. A local guy, rises up to kill the local dragon, becomes a hero because the dragon oppresses the people and people are terrified of it. So yeah, there's stories of it all throughout history. We think that after the flood that the environment changed so much that it was harder and harder for the dinosaurs to be sustained and to live. And so they began to die out, plus people killed them. Like we said, local hero goes and kills it. It's just like Indiana used to have bears and big cats, but as people populated, we began to then force them out and move them on elsewhere. And so in Job, God calls attention to 2 dinosaurs, and he gives them names, Behemoth and Leviathan. Job 40 talks about Behemoth. Behemoth, when I was a kid, we would have described him what is called in the dinosaur world as a brontosaurus. Today I think he's called a papasaurus or a patasaurus. The biggest dinosaur who's a vegetarian. It says here that describes him as a vegetarian. If I can find it. Behold, Behemoth, I've made thee. Verse 15, he eats grass like an ox. His strength is in his loins. The force of his navel is his belly. He's big. He's giant. He's a big old dinosaur. People try to say that Behemoth was like an elephant or a hippo or something, but God made sure they couldn't, because he put in his description here, verse 17, he moveth his tail like a cedar, and the sinews of his stones are wrapped together. He moves his tail like a cedar. He's talking about a giant cedar tree. Israel was known for or in Israel's time, the cedars of Lebanon were famous. These giant cedar trees, we're talking huge, big around trees that they would use to build all their ancient buildings. Not a little cedar sapling. Look at an elephant's tail. Look at a hippo's tail. Do you call that a giant cedar? Would you make mention of that? No. So God's making sure that they don't call it an elephant, or they don't call it a rhinoceros. And so God's making sure that by putting this description in there. He says he's big. Verse 19 says, he is the chief of the ways of God. He that made him can make his sword to approach unto him. He says he's chief. He's the biggest thing God ever made. The biggest land animal, the biggest animal that God has ever made. And that would be brontosaur. We use the word behemoth in today's language to describe something that's huge. Like, hey, I caught a fish. It was a real behemoth. We'd use it to exaggerate and say how big. It was giant. But Behemoth is a huge vegetarian. Leviathan is something different. He's big still, but he's mean. God is teaching us that as creator, he should be respected. He's going to argue, I made Behemoth and I made Leviathan. You need to show me some respect. God's saying if you're afraid of Leviathan and Behemoth, like who would want to stumble across a giant dinosaur unaware? He says you should fear him. You should fear him who made them. Because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, the Bible says. And that's Proverbs 11. That's Proverbs 1, verse 7. Psalms 111, verse 10, and a few other places. Leviathan is scary. He says something like, he's such a big, scary animal. Would you try to catch him with a hook like you would a fish or maybe even an alligator or something like that? Look at chapter 41, verse 4. Verse 1. Canst thou draw out Leviathan with a hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Oh, you're going to try to snare him? You're going to try to catch him? I don't think so. Verse 4. Will you make a covenant with him, and you take him home and wilt thou take him for a servant forever? You think you're going to tame him? You're going to make a covenant with him? That basically means you're going to make him your friend. You're going to make him your pet. Says, that's not going to happen with Leviathan. He's mean and angry. Verse 5. Wilt thou play with him as with a bird? And wilt thou bind him for thy maidens? You're going to catch him and make him a pet, take him home in a little cage and let your little girls play with him? No, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen at all. Verse 7 even says, "Canst thou fill his skin with barbed irons?" Arrows, barbed irons or spears, anything with a sharp tip on it, iron tips. Check this out in verse 8. He says, "Lay thy hand upon him, remember the battle, do no more." It says if you go and lay a hand on him and you live to tell about it, you're never going to do that again. You're never going to be dumb enough to go touch Leviathan again. He says, no, he's too vicious. You're not going to do it. Verse 10, "None is so fierce that dare stir him up, who then is able to stand before him." He says there's no one even stoop enough to go try to rouse him and aggravate him. He says who's going to go stand before him and like shake their fist to do anything? He says you're not going to do it. Verse 14, "Who can open the doors of his faith? His teeth are terrible round about." He talks about having a bunch of teeth, that his teeth are razors. It's terrible, it's scary, it's terrifying. Like, you know, if he opened up, it's like, because I think he's a T-Rex. Yeah, I do. I think he's a T-Rex, Tyrannosaurus Rex. Tyrannosaurus Rex would be, Tyrannosaurus means a tyrant. You can hear it in there, Tyranna. It's a tyrant, and Rex means king. So he's the tyrant king. I think that's who it is. Look at verse 14 again. Verse 14, "Who can open the doors of his face? His teeth are terrible round about. His scales are as his pride, and shut up as close as a seal." He's got tight armor on. No one can even get near unto him. So imagine a T-Rex. You know, he's mean, he's terrible, but he's worse. He's worse than what even Jurassic Park can portray. Verse 18, "By his sneezing a light doth shine." Sneezing kind of sounds like sneezing. So when he goes, you know, it says a light shines. Something bright comes out of his mouth. By his sneezing, his eyes shine. Sneezing, breathe out. His eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostril goeth smoke, and out of his seething pot a cauldron. His breath kindles coals, and a flame goes out of his mouth. He's a fire-breathing dragon. We have instances of this. He could do that. Bombardier beetle we have today has two compartments. The chemicals mix at the end when he ejects them. That makes a boiling hot liquid. Kind of even it makes an explosion sometimes. There's a water bug that kind of does the same thing. Makes a little jet by ejecting two things together. And so we can do this. You know that we have there's fossil record of dinosaurs with two big chambers in their head, and we think maybe that's what it came down and mixed together, and they could fire breathe. The Bible's true. Every word in the Bible is absolutely true. And God is saying this. It's not Job saying it. It's not some man asking or making up these legends. It is God saying, have you considered Leviathan? Leviathan's a big bad dude. He's got big old teeth. You're not going to mess with him. He breathes fire. You know, so God is mentioning this, so I believe it's true. There's legends all around the world about fire-breathing dragons, and yet we're going to say they're all liars and they're all making it up. I don't think, you know, it could be a story. We can make up a story about flying cars. It's not real, but we can also see when things are reported as history. God's recording this as something that's real. He says he's so big and mean that iron, the hardest metal that they had at that time, still one of our hardest metal, he eats it like straw. Verse 27, he esteemeth iron as straw and brass as rotten wood. It's like the strongest metals that they can make, nothing for him. It's like crumbles he's wake. Verse 32 says, he maketh the path to shine after him. You would think that the deep is a hoary. When he walks, he destroys everything he's passed. He makes a shiny path after he goes through it. And then verse 34, he beholdeth all the high things. He is the king over all the children of pride. He is the big king. Rex means king. Tyrannosaurus, the tyrant king. He is the biggest, meanest, ferocious thing that God has ever made. And God says, I made him. I made him. And you think you're going to yell at me? You think you're going to shake your fist at me and argue with God? God says, you wouldn't do that with Leviathan. You wouldn't even want to stand around the vegetarian behemoth. He says, but you're going to try to shake your fist at me? I made these things. So you need to have some respect. I challenge you back to reread it. Think about them being dinosaurs. And think about being, see how it describes it as a brontosaur or a patasaurus. Or a T-Rex there as Leviathan. And I think you'll find that you can see the pictures that are there. So that was day one. Day two, go ahead and read ahead on giants. Giants, guys that are bigger than Shaq. Yeah, guys that are 12 foot tall, 9 foot tall. We'll look at some of the things about them. The lion-like men of Moab. We'll do that as well. So as you read it, draw pictures in your mind. Think about it. Don't just read the text. Read and think. Meditate on it. Make a little movie as it describes the scene. Take time to think about where they were, what's going on, what's he trying to describe to me, and build that picture in your head. And remember that every word in the Bible is absolutely true. And so, see you tomorrow.